Hello, my name is Sarah and I am one of the detective constables working within Police Scotland's Specialist Crime Division. Specialist Crime Division is a national division providing highly trained, effective specialist resources in support of local policing. I work within the public protection area. The public protection business area works across several disciplines, all aimed at protecting people at risk of harm in our communities, including domestic abuse, forced marriage, honour-based abuse, stalking and harassment, human trafficking, sexual crime, adult support and protection, and child protection. I work within the Domestic Abuse Coordination Unit, and this unit is key to Police Scotland's strategic direction and engages heavily with internal and external partners. The unit is responsible for ensuring Police Scotland is fully sighted on all local and national domestic abuse, forced marriage, honour-based abuse and stalking and harassment related matters, as well as researching and developing good practice across the organisation. This presentation today will focus on domestic abuse and Police Scotland's response to this. Police Scotland was established on the 1st of April 2013 and is responsible for policing across the whole of Scotland. That's some 28,168 square miles, covering a third of the United Kingdom's landmass with a unique range of urban, rural, island and remote communities. It is the second largest force in the UK with 23,000 officers and staff working together for the people of Scotland. Our purpose is to improve the safety and well-being of people, places and communities in Scotland, focusing on keeping people safe in line with our values of integrity, fairness and respect, and with human rights at the heart of everything we do. There are 13 local policing divisions, each headed by a chief superintendent who ensures that local policing in each area is responsive, accountable and tailored to meet local needs. Each division has response officers, community officers, local crime investigation, public protection and local intelligence. The local policing divisions are supported by national specialist divisions. The Specialist Crime Division provides investigative and intelligence functions such as major crime investigation, public protection, organised crime, counter-terrorism, intelligence and safer communities. The Operational Support Division provides specialist support functions such as road policing, firearms, public order, air support, marine policing, dogs and the mounted branch, as well as emergency and events planning. These national divisions ensure every community in Scotland has access to specialist policing services. The headquarters of Police Scotland are located at Tullyallen Castle in Fife. This is also home to the Scottish Police College. Police Scotland has established a reputation for successfully and safely policing major international events, including the Glasgow 2014 Commonwealth Games and the United Nations 26th Conference of the Parties, COP26, Climate Change Summit in 2021. COP26 required one of the largest policing operations in the United Kingdom's history, with up to 10,000 officers deployed during a 25-day operation across 62 venues with 40,000 visitors to Scotland, including 128 world leaders. Police Scotland played an important role to ensure significant events following the death of Her Majesty the Queen were held safely, securely, and with dignity. Local policing delivery is at the heart of our service, and Police Scotland is committed to providing the best of local policing, supported by the strength of the National Service. The aim of this presentation is to shine a spotlight on domestic abuse in Scotland, including the nature and scale of domestic abuse, Police Scotland's response to domestic abuse, our capability and capacity, the challenges we face, and how we are continuing to strengthen our partnerships with a range of organisations in the public, private, third sector and communities to ensure that we all play our part to prevent and ultimately end domestic abuse and all forms of gender-based violence. The term domestic abuse is often referred to, whether in newspapers, magazines, on social media or television, and within communities. With this in mind, it is reasonable to expect that the term could be defined differently by individuals and communities. I would like to take the opportunity to explain how domestic abuse is defined by Police Scotland. The definition, which is agreed and published in the joint protocol between Police Scotland and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service, defines domestic abuse as any form of physical, verbal, sexual, psychological, or financial abuse which might amount to criminal conduct and which takes place within the context of a relationship. The relationship will be between partners, married, cohabiting, civil partnership or otherwise, or ex-partners. The abuse can be committed in the home or elsewhere, including online. It is acknowledged that domestic abuse as a form of gender-based violence is predominantly perpetrated by men against women. This definition also acknowledges and includes abuse of male victims by female perpetrators and includes abuse of lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender and intersex people within relationships. Different definitions are used by countries within the United Kingdom. The definitions used in England and in Wales and Northern Ireland include familial relationships and family members respectively. Effectively tackling domestic abuse is an organisational priority for both the Police Service of Scotland and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service. A consistent and robust approach is essential when dealing with criminal conduct arising from domestic abuse. This protocol outlines the procedures and practices that will be followed by Police Scotland and the Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service in the investigation, reporting and prosecution of allegations involving an element of domestic abuse. The Crown Office and Procurator Fiscal Service is Scotland's prosecution service and death investigation authority. They receive reports about crimes from the police and other reporting agencies and then decide what action to take, including whether to prosecute someone. This joint protocol ensures that we will treat all victims and witnesses in a fair, sensitive, respectful and ethical manner. We will treat all suspects and accused persons fairly and ethically and respect their rights under law. We will ensure there is a consistency in our approach whilst taking into account the needs of individuals. We will meet the needs of the communities we serve by recognising the diversity of culture, religion, ethnicity, age, gender, transgender identity and sexual orientation that comprise our society. We will consider any special requirements that vulnerable or disabled people may have. Regard will also be had to the significant impact that domestic abuse can have on children who are exposed to it. Police Scotland recorded 64,807 incidents of domestic abuse in the year 2021-22. 39% of these incidents included the recording of at least one crime. 9% of all sexual crime and 24% of all violent crime is domestic related. The demands on the service are significant. Every 9 minutes we receive a report of domestic abuse. On average, each of these incidents takes around 9 hours to deal with, and this does not include court preparation time, follow-up inquiries, or the policing of bail conditions. It is estimated that these demands account for around 20% of operational police time. Police Scotland use a 3-tiered approach to domestic abuse to provide a structure to uniform, local and national specialist resources. This approach ensures that regardless of the community or individual's background or circumstances, victims in Scotland are given the same level of service and response. The first and largest tier of the diagram represents the most significant resource, that of local policing. Whilst each and every one of our officers and staff has a personal responsibility to reduce the harm caused by domestic abuse, the first response comes from local policing officers. These are the officers who best know the local communities, their needs and demands, as well as the local criminal intelligence and offenders. Every officer receives training in domestic abuse and has access to guidance and specialist departments based in their locality. The next tier in our response represents an escalation to our domestic abuse investigation units. These units are again locally based within each of our 13 local policing divisions. Their core role is to protect victims, target perpetrators and support frontline colleagues in tackling domestic abuse. They are responsible for ensuring that incidents which involve lengthy investigation, serial or high-risk perpetrators are brought to an appropriate conclusion. They share information with partners and participate in multi-agency tasking and coordination groups, collaboratively seeking to bring offenders to justice or reduce the threat posed by them. The final tier of our approach is the Domestic Abuse Task Force. This is a small corps of officers based regionally, with one stationed in the east, one in the west, and recognising the unique geography of Scotland, 3 teams stationed at key sites across the north. Their role is pioneering within the UK, and they proactively target, by any possible legitimate means, serial perpetrators of domestic abuse who present the greatest risk of harm to multiple victims and their families. They do not stop at recent reports, but will look over the lifeline of a suspect's relationships to establish a chain of corroborative evidence of conduct in order to protect future potential victims. This three-tiered approach cannot work in isolation, and it is held together and coordinated by the work of a small team of specialists within our Domestic Abuse Coordination Unit. Their role is to provide policy support to officers at each and every level, be it local or national, to ensure that the policing of domestic abuse is delivered consistently across Scotland, eradicating any form of perceived postcode lottery. They apply policy support, engage with academic research, and drive forward innovative new ways of tackling domestic abuse, alongside partners who are key to our success. The checklist, which is a series of 27 questions, helps in identifying, assessing, and managing risk. The simple series of questions makes it easier to understand the risk someone is facing, so they can get the right help as quickly as possible. A high score means the victim needs urgent help. These domestic abuse questions require to be completed for all victims of domestic abuse on every police attendance at a domestic abuse incident. This maximises opportunities for victims to disclose any abuse. It's important to listen to victims and the answers they provide to the questions so that we know what action to take. A victim may minimise the abusive behaviours of the perpetrator or may deny a crime has occurred at all. Understanding that victims of domestic abuse can be suffering from trauma helps to ensure officers and staff respond and engage with them effectively. Traumatised victims may not be able to understand and respond to everything that is said to them, or be able to react or recall information in a rational and coherent way. Scores are graded as high, medium, and standard risk. The domestic abuse questions do not replace professional judgment. Once we have the risk assessment score, we need to consider safety planning. Although every tier has a responsibility for the safety of our victim and their families, our Tier 2 officers have enhanced options available to look at the risk assessment and perpetrator management. Once we identify risk, we use this risk management model known as RARA, R-A-R-A. This means we remove the risk, for example, by arresting the suspect and obtaining a remand in custody, or enforcing breaches of bail conditions and court orders. Avoid the risk, for example, by rehousing a victim or significant witnesses, or placement in a shelter in a location unknown to the perpetrator. Reducing the risk, for example, by joint intervention with our partners. Victim safety planning, target hardening, and use of protective legislation. Or we can accept the risk. For example, in standard and medium cases, after all attempts to apply safety measures have been exhausted. The risk and safety plan will be reviewed if a trigger point is identified. Our Tier 2 officers have responsibility of issuing vulnerable victims with technical devices which allow for an immediate police response. The battery levels of these devices are checked regularly to ensure that they are charged and working well. These devices look like regular mobile phones, however, are only capable of contacting police. The role of the Domestic Abuse Task Force is to proactively target perpetrators of domestic abuse who are identified as presenting the greatest risk of harm to victims and their families. The proactive approach is a legitimate tactic employed during investigations. It involves identifying previous partners of domestic abuse perpetrators and making contact with them. By doing this, it allows police to prevent future crime and detect previous undisclosed crimes against victims. The tactic also provides victims of domestic abuse the opportunity to engage with the criminal justice process and access support networks. We are aware of the long-term impact domestic abuse can have on victims, and therefore we take a trauma-informed approach to any contact made, ensuring that support is available for victims to access through our partners. It is important that victims engage with the police investigation of their own choice. As our knowledge of domestic abuse has developed over the years, we have learned that the most devastating forms of abuse were often being left unaddressed in law, and the victim, and often police officers, being left feeling helpless. The Domestic Abuse Act, passed by Scottish Parliament in February 2018, created a specific offence of domestic abuse which covers not only physical abuse but other forms of psychological harm and coercive and controlling behaviour. It defines abusive behaviour as behaviour that is that of violent, threatening or intimidating, and relevant effects as including controlling, frightening, humiliating, degrading or punishing someone. Coercive control denies victims their right to feel safe in their personal relationships and restricts their freedom to make their own decisions. Victims may lose their autonomy and become isolated, controlled, or manipulated, and will often live in fear. It can have a devastating effect on every aspect of a victim's life. We hear directly from victims all the time about the behaviours that amount to abuse of power and control. The problem previously was that the law dealt with incidents in an episodic manner. Discrete and isolated incidents of assault or threats, but not the bigger picture and the continuing pattern of cumulative abuse to which people are subjected. The legislation draws on the lived experience of survivors of domestic abuse and recognises that coercive control is just as damaging as physical attacks, if not more so, and can destroy a victim's autonomy. In addition, the legislation recognises the impact domestic abuse has on children. Legislation captures all abusive behaviours under one offence, whether financial, sexual, psychological, physical, or emotional, includes property and pets. Scotland also has specific legislation which ensures that victims can specify the gender of the police officer who is noting their statement, conducting any interview with a victim for specific types of offences including domestic abuse. This is the Victim and Witnesses Scotland Act 2014. Police Scotland also recognise that where a victim requires an interpreter, the victim will have the opportunity to specify the gender of the interpreter. The Disclosure Scheme for Domestic Abuse Scotland gives people the right to ask about the background of their partner. It also allows concerned relatives and friends the right to ask about someone's partner. They can ask if they have been abusive in the past. The scheme also gives Police Scotland the power to tell people that they may be at risk. This information can be given if it is not asked for. Where we have information that a person may be at harm of domestic abuse by their partner, we, as the police, have the power to tell them. Since the national launch of the scheme in October 2015, 19,229 applications have been made. The Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference is victim-focused and provides a partnership forum for sharing information and taking actions that will reduce future harm to very high-risk victims of domestic abuse and their children. Partners represented include Police Scotland, Criminal Justice Social Work, Children and Families Social Work, Health, Housing, and independent domestic abuse advocates and other specialists from the statutory and voluntary sectors. At the heart of this conference is the working assumption that no single agency or individual can see the complete picture of the life of a victim, but all may have insights that are crucial to their safety. The aim of the multi-agency tasking and coordination is to effectively tackle domestic abuse perpetrators who present the greatest risk of harm. This is achieved by effective partnership working to identify these perpetrators, multi-agency information sharing to support intelligence development and proactive enforcement action against identified perpetrators, and using tasking and coordination to proactively investigate identified perpetrators using relevant and legitimate tactics. If you have any questions about today's presentation, please do not hesitate to direct these to the event organisers and we will do our best to respond to these as quickly as possible. For more information on Police Scotland, you can visit www.scotland.police.uk. Thank you.